Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Less than 2 weeks to go before the Bengals kick off the regular season. We still got a big event to happen before you can go from preseason to regular season. It's the worst day of the year for many of these professionals that they will find out that they haven't made the team. But with the roster expansions over the last few years due to the COVID rules, now you can have 55 players on a roster. 2 are from the practice squad each week. You can have 16 guys in the practice squad. The roster is bigger than ever, so we're only going to be cutting 30 players or so today because of the practice squad. That is what we're going to do on today's show, Bengals on the Brain. I'm Joe Goodberry. The show is presented by First Star Logistics. And we're going to cut the Bengals roster down. And we're going to do it using the grades I have. If you've gotten the Bengals on the Brain guidebook with the grades on every single player on the roster, I've updated those throughout preseason on guys we didn't have grades on, or maybe things we now know that we didn't know then. For example, I've lowered Miles Murphy's grade. He doesn't look like he's ready to be a pass rusher right now, and maybe will be by week 8, and we'll adjust it back. But, guys like that took a hit. Jackson Carman looking much more uncomfortable on the right side than he does the left. His versatility takes a hit, and, that could keep him off the roster. So we're going to use my spreadsheet, use the document I normally use. We're going to look at the grades. We're going to talk about preseason. We're going to talk about each of the players eligible to make the roster. We're even going to go down to the 46-man active roster, because I think that's key in deciding who will make the team and who won't. Because if you're not going to be active, well, then you better be a developmental guy that we can hope for in the future. And if you're not that, then it's hard to get on the roster. So let's start that. Cut down day is Tuesday, 4 p.m. Let's look at what I think it'll look like. And so here it is. Here's the roster. You'll see the grades in the G column. And some of these aren't going to match exactly in your book, like I said, because I have updated them. We're going to start with some of the easy guys here. I've got the positions on the left side. Hopefully we can keep count without going too far. We'll start with the easy guys, though. I think we're going to go with Evan McPherson as the kicker. What do you guys think there? Let me just slide him in real fast. And Brad Robbins as the punter. Although, let's talk about Drew Chrisman. He had a really good punt against Washington. I think Chrisman could make a roster. And I think Chrisman could make the practice squad, to be honest with you. So we're going to keep an eye on him and see how it goes with Robbins. I thought at times looking tired in practices when I was there for camp, punting back to back to back to back. Would get to like the 6th punt, and he would look noticeably shakier. So having a guy on the practice squad would allow you to not overuse your starting punter while he acclimates to NFL workload. Let's go back up to quarterback then. So that's 3 guys on the roster right away from the 53. We got to get to 50. Ideally split at 25-25 between offense and defense. We will start with quarterback. Oddly enough, Joe Burrow has made the roster. But the backup is a big question. And in fact, I don't know that either of these guys are the right answer. Guys like PJ Walker that were cut from the Chicago Bears, formerly a backup spot starter with the Carolina Panthers, has had some NFL success. Maybe you kick tires on someone like that. Maybe you claim somebody like Will Greer from the Dallas Cowboys, who just had a great 4th or 3rd preseason game. It was 4th, actually, because they played in the Hall of Fame game. Maybe he's more of a practice squad candidate or quarterback 3 candidate, and you keep somebody like Simeon or Browning, and you find a 3rd quarterback to put on the roster. Until we get there, until we can do the claiming, I'm not going to project it. I'm going to project that Jake Browning has won the backup quarterback job as of now. And we will see how they play the rest of that. I could see it, like I said, here's the scenario I can see. Browning wins the job. Simeon goes on the practice squad. Or they claim a guy for the third quarterback job, or they sign a guy for the third quarterback job. It's kind of how they did it with Browning a couple years ago. Is they claimed him, liked him, put him on the practice squad, and developed him. 2 years later, he's the backup quarterback. So I could see that definitely happening. And we're going to move on for now, tabling Trevor Simeon until we get to the end to see if he can make the roster. Actually, this is pretty easy, running back. Not much to say here. I don't even know if I need to do it one by one. I think all four are going to make the team here. I think more question comes down with who's active on Sunday, which we will try to figure out after we have the 53-man roster set. We will go through that process as well. But yes, I think all four make it. I think Chris Evans had a much better summer than he's ever had. And I know we've been hurt before by this and getting our excitement up and falling into that trap before, but I do believe it this time. And I do believe he looks better and is playing better than ever before. So put all four of them on the roster and we'll figure out who's active when we get there. As for receiver, of course, we're going to put Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the roster. I'm going to go down to the slot guys next. And I'm going to say Boyd and Charlie Jones both make it. I think Trent Irwin is more of wide receiver number 4. So let me swap those if I can. Even though I have Charlie Jones graded slightly higher, I would tweak Trent Irwin after watching him in camp and preseason. I think he's good. I should probably tweak him more. I think I did, and he just only came out as a 69.2 because he doesn't have a special trait in any way. But some of his traits are even better than I thought. I thought he was just average in everything. And then I put his ball skills up a little bit. I put his speed up a little bit. I put his athleticism up a little bit. That gives you your 5 receivers. How many do you keep from there? I think Andre Yoshivas did win a job. Put him on there. And in fact, he doesn't look incapable on special teams either. So you could end up with him active on game day. As of now, I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to come back. I think Stanley Morgan Jr. makes a strong case for still being the best special teamer on the team. I think when we get to the inactive list for game day is when we're going to see why Stanley Morgan makes the roster. But as of now, I'm going to hold it there and leave it there. Go on the tight end and Irv Smith Jr. We didn't get to see in preseason at all because the starters didn't play on offense other than Jonah Williams. I think he is tight end 1. I do believe the coaches when they say they value Drew Sample and they value the things he does that we don't always see, which means his blocking and his intelligence. Again, I think he's painfully average at everything else. But you need a guy with size. When you look at the rest of this lineup, these guys are all 6'3", 6'4", 6'1" and some change, and 230 to 240 to 250. Drew Sample's out there full size, 6'6" and 255. You can match up with some defensive ends. Not that we want our tight ends pass protecting against defensive ends, but it happens. And you don't always want them blocking defensive ends, but it happens. So as of now, Drew Sample is their wide tight end. He's their blocker of the group. Tight end 3, though, I think it's Tanner Hudson. I think he's done enough in camp. I think he's done enough in preseason, despite getting the concussion week 2. Or was that week 1? Yeah, week 1, he missed week 2. He did enough in week 1 to really pretty much confirm what you saw in camp, and then doing it again that final week in Washington. I think he is the best receiver of the backups. He's the best vertical threat of the backups. He has NFL experience as well. The other part is Mitch Wilcox. If you want to keep him, no doubt in my mind, you can get him on the practice squad and you can elevate him. So I'm going to table Mitch Wilcox for now. I think he's going to be on the roster, just not the active roster, or at least not the 53-man roster. We got 16 spots on the practice squad. He's a perfect guy for that. Think about it. While he was hurt, I didn't hear anyone give him interest around the league for signing him in free agency or in the offseason in the summer even. And he was there the entire time for the Bengals. I don't think anyone would claim him off his 15 snaps in that last preseason game, mostly used as a blocker, strictly really as a blocker. I think we'd be okay letting him test the waiver wire. Moving on to offensive line. Orlando Brown Jr., clearly, let's just do the starting lineup as if it should be, starting with Orlando Brown Jr., and then at left guard, clearly, is Cordell Volson. We haven't gotten to see these guys. We're hoping for improvements out of year two. Cordell Volson, Ted Karras going into year two with the Bengals at center. Alex Kappa as well. Remember, these are all new starters last year. So how long will it take for these guys to gel? Will they gel right off the bat? Jonah Williams clearly won the right tackle job. La'el Collins, writing pup next to him, just so we're clear, because he did not practice the entire camp and off-season summer, you can put him on the pup list, which means he's not going to count towards your 53-man roster. You can hold him, and I believe you can't clear him until week 6. I should have looked this up beforehand. You have between week 6 and week 10 to clear him. So that'd be a nice time, and you're probably going to have an injury in that span of half the season. Probably a good time to get a veteran player back on the roster. Now, who am I missing? There we go. So these guys go all the way down here for interior offensive line. I'm going to go with the interior offensive lineman first. And I think Max Sharping beat out Trey Hill for the backup job. I think he looked the same as Trey Hill at center. I'm not saying Sharping looked great. I think he looked the same as Trey Hill at center. But at guard, I think Sharping looked clearly better than Trey Hill. I don't think Hill has that athleticism to play guard. And really, you'd like your centers to be more athletic as well. It's amazing he is serviceable at center despite that. But the injury, or not the injuries, the penalties for him are just extreme at times. And I think it's once every 36 snaps in the regular season for Trey Hill. And then he's even crushing that rate right now in preseason or this past preseason. So not ideal. That gives us 6 offensive linemen. I think the next best swing guy, and because of what they've invested and why, it's a sunk cost, right? If you just say, well, he's a second round pick, let's keep Jackson Carman because we paid that much for him. That's not always the safest bet to take, but I do think Carman looks fine as a spot starting left tackle. It's just when he has to play guard or right tackle, and he does have some experience doing that, he can do it in a pinch. He looks much worse. So maybe give him another year of practicing and training at those positions. Because think about it, if Orlando Brown went down, are we putting Jackson Carman at left tackle, or are you moving Jonah Williams back over there? I think you could make a case for either answer because you might be better off putting Carman there because that's the only position he can adequately play. That gives us 7 offensive linemen. We'd like to at least get to 9, I believe. Deontay Smith hurt his shoulder, as far as we know as of now. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a serious injury or not. It seemed like he was playing before Hakeem Adeniji. It seemed like he was having his best year. If healthy, he's offensive lineman number 8. He can play both tackle spots. He has played both guard spots. I don't think he's strong enough to play guard, which is where position number 9 comes in. If Deontay Smith is not healthy, I think Hakeem Adeniji is still on the roster. And you see Smith's grade there much lower than Hakeem Adeniji. Yes, he's had his best summer. This is Smith. I'm not sure that means he's good yet. He still looks like he needs reps and experience. Still looks like he needs time. And I don't know if you are afforded the ability to give him that time. That gives us 24 players on offense. So we've got room to go to 25. We will come back to this. when we figure out what's going on the defensive side. But so far, that gives us 9 offensive linemen, 3 tight ends, 6 wide receivers, 4 running backs, and 2 quarterbacks. Let's jump into the defense. All right, so now we're heading to the defensive side, and we've got room for one extra if we need it. Let's start with the defensive line and the defensive end specifically, as Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard clearly make the team. 2 best defensive ends. I think so. Sam Hubbard's actually looked a little more spry than normal, a little more quicker than normal. Maybe it's going against Jonah Williams in practice and Jackson Carman, or who was it for the Falcons? Caleb McGarry. Was that the game that? Yeah, that's the game the defense played. Hubbard looked good, man. I think defensive end is pretty stacked and pretty easy for the first 5 guys. Obviously, Miles Murphy makes the roster. If Joseph Osai, who tweaked his ankle, we don't have a word on that. He's got 2 weeks to be ready for game 1. We'll see how that goes. If it's longer than that, who takes his spot? Who takes his role? Is that when Murphy plays? I may even slot, if we're doing active, and we'll get to active and actives, but I'd even slot Cam Sample above Miles Murphy. I think Sample has had a great summer. He's gone from a player that was like I think he was a 70.7 when I started this summer. So fringe like role player. Now he's a clean 72. And Murphy's a 73, mostly off of his size and raw athleticism. He's got a ways to go in a lot of ways. And I thought he'd be a really good run defender to start the year or to start his career. And I'm not sure he's that yet. So we're starting with, we'd like to get, I think in my mind, I'd like to go 10 D linemen, 5 linebackers, 10 defensive backs. It's a clean 25, and I think it's the best way to handle it. We need to get our D tackles in there. I think DJ Reader has made the team. He's pretty good. BJ Hill, the other starter. And then Zach Carter is the other semi-starter. He will play his 500 snaps at least. A lot of 3D tackles, if you want to say it. And they're 3-4-5-2 defense. Those 3 are locks. I'm going to be honest with you, Josh Tupou is a lock as well. I highlighted it in the, did I do it on Bengals on the Brain? I can't remember if that was on Bengals on the Brain. Yes, it was, because we did the entire first drive of the defense. Tupou made 2 plays there. He made a play later. He's on the team. He's the backup nose tackle, clearly. But that gives us 9 now. And do we go with, I think the conversation could be between, let's get this conversation right next to each other here. Jay Tufele, do you keep a 5th defensive tackle? And it's not to say that Dominique Davis, let's spend a minute on these guys that I don't think are going to make the roster, Dominique Davis and Jeffrey Gunter. I think Gunter looks better than last year, but the D-end room got better. Dominique Davis looks better than last year as well. Actually, he looks solid and like a practice squad nose tackle, a guy that maybe in 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whenever it is, if an injury occurs, you do call him up. I do think he's clearly the 3rd nose tackle on this roster. I think he looks better than Tyler Shelvin ever did already in preseason. So I want to keep him. I don't think he'll get claimed. I don't think Jeffrey Gunter will get claimed. So now let's go to the 2 guys that we'll be discussing in terms of that 10th spot on the defensive line. Jay Tufele, Raymond Johnson. Raymond Johnson coming off a absolute fire preseason. Playing both outside end spots, playing defensive tackle, winning from all of those spots. Absolutely deserving of a roster spot. If this defensive end room wasn't as strong as it is, I think Raymond Johnson would be a lock. Jay Tufele, on the other hand, is a bit inconsistent, bit of a wild card. Doesn't always see the ball, doesn't always play with great discipline. But man, when he wins, he absolutely destroys his opponent. He's quick enough, he's stout enough, he's strong enough to beat anyone in front of him and to just be a general pain in the butt and on any snap. And he's played for this team. And wouldn't you like that depth at D tackle over D end here? The thing is, Raymond Johnson, because he's played both sides and because he's played defensive tackle, is a lot like Joseph Osai. If Osai is hurt and is going to miss 3-4 weeks, maybe Raymond Johnson does play because Miles Murphy doesn't look like he's ready. So maybe we table these two guys here until we're ready to call actives and inactives, and we find out which guy. Because if Raymond Johnson's active, if you're getting to that point where he's active, well, then you probably want him. But if we're talking about an inactive player, are you developing Raymond Johnson? Or would you rather develop Jay Tufele as the 5th defensive tackle for the games you may need him if a guy goes down? All right, moving on to linebacker. We'll come back to those guys. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt. You guys make the roster. Hakeem Davis-Gaither, Marcus Bailey. You guys make the roster. Linebacker's pretty easy. It's a lot like running back for them. They've drafted these guys. They've had these guys in the wings. They haven't really brought in much competition. I think Joe Bacci, whenever he plays well. And he looks like a solid backup linebacker. And if he has to start for a game, I've got no problem with it. But if as the 5th guy, that's rarely going to happen. But I do think he is a fine player and a fine backup. So those are your 5 linebackers. I think Chidobe Awuzie starts week 1 and plays. We do have some injuries here that we have to account for. Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton are your number 2 and number 3s, but they're pretty good 2 and 3. Some of the better. I think Cam Taylor-Britt could be taking off on year 2. As this grade indicates, I think he's pretty good already. Clearly, DJ Turner makes the roster as a 2nd-round pick. I think the lock that nobody knows about outside of Cincinnati is Jalen Davis. He really looks like Mike Hilton, mimics his game from Mike Hilton. Very good against the run, willing tackler, that kind of thing, can blitz, all that. Did it all in preseason again. And that gives you 5 corners. We're going to leave it there for now. And we're going to go to safeties because I want 10 defensive backs in all. Dax Hill, who I think is on pace to have a breakout. Fantastic sophomore year, first year starting. We're going to slide in Nick Scott and Jordan Battle next. Both make the roster, obviously. And I don't think they're ready to give up on Tyson Anderson. He had a very good special teams preseason. He had a very good game 1 in preseason with 2 interceptions, 1 pick 6. He was a 5th-round pick out of Toledo last year. Didn't get to play as a rookie. But they had a 3rd-round grade on him despite getting him in the 5th round. I think he's somebody that they really like. And that gives us 9 defensive backs. 9. Now, let's get to 10. Does the veteran Sidney Jones, if he has to play, the hard part here is not knowing who's healthy, right? Because DJ Turner wasn't able to play, Chidobe Awuzie wasn't able to play, Sidney Jones wasn't able to play that final preseason game. We haven't seen Jones since week 1 of preseason. Or do you go with DJ Ivey, who's supposed to be a very good special teamer and has looked better than expected at corner? If Ivey has to play, I don't feel comfortable yet against starters. I think Alan George, again, looked like he improved from year 1 and is destined for the practice squad. Maybe you can get Alan George and Sidney Jones on the practice squad if neither of them get claimed. Sidney Jones could with his NFL experience. Would DJ Ivey get claimed? He's a 7th-round pick. I think that's the part we have to decide too. And at safety, Michael Thomas, the veteran of the group. I think you can get him on the practice squad, and I think he'd willingly go onto the practice squad, and you can elevate him from there if you need to. Actually, that's going to be my first practice squad guy. Down here, we got 16 slots for the practice squad. And I'm going to say DJ Ivey. And here's why. I think this guy in a perfect world is inactive on Sundays. Look at it. You're probably going with Awuzie, Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton, DJ Turner, Jalen Davis. 5 active guys. And maybe it's not Jalen Davis. Maybe DJ Turner can play some slot. But I'm going to go with DJ Ivey. Probably inactive here. to start the year. And that gives us 10 defensive backs, 5 linebackers, and 9 defensive linemen. And I'm not ready to call it yet still between Tufele and Raymond Johnson. I feel like if Osai is hurt, then I'm going with Raymond Johnson. Let's go with that as of now. We've had these guys in the past that have had great edge rushing preseasons. Marcus Hunt, 2014. Chris Smith, Dante Moak, Darius Hodge, Raymond Johnson. There's another guy in there that I'm missing. Anyways, they haven't gone on to great success, so you can't take too much of the preseason and say, well, Raymond Johnson's going to be a player for them. But I think his versatility to play defensive tackle is key here. He may be your best interior pass rusher based on what we saw. He's got the most moves. He's stout enough. He's athletic enough. He really had, he won with like 4 different moves in the preseason. Not many guys on the inside are doing that. And for the last spot on offense, I'm going to go and keep it with Stanley Morgan Jr. I'd like to add a row here if we can. Stanley Morgan Jr. as the last one. So that should give us, not including Michael Thomas, 53 players. And it does. That's our 53. Let's try and get guys on the practice squad and decide from there. And then we'll try and look at the active roster as a whole. Remember, we're keeping La'el Collins as on the PUP. So that's the 53 as it stands now. We could move a guy, slide him in and out. Remember, you can have 55 for game days. You bring up 2 practice squad guys. You can only keep 46 active. So let's see how we'd build that real quick. All right, let's form the practice squad and start from there. I really like what Alan George showed as a progression. I'm going to slide him in there. I want both linebackers here, Tyler Murray and Shaka Hayward. I think both showed enough as undrafted rookies to warrant keeping on the practice squad. I don't have a grade on Tyler Murray yet. I didn't watch him in college, and we only got about 45 snaps in preseason, so I wasn't ready to throw a grade on him. But I believe PFF had him as the next best linebacker other than the starters that played. So that's good for him. I talked about putting Drew Chrisman on there. I'm going to slide him into one of those spots as well, just because we have a rookie starter. If Chrisman doesn't get claimed, let's hold on to him for now in one of these practice squad spots. I'd like to get Jeffrey Gunter and Dominique Davis onto the squad as well. I'd still like to develop both guys. I'd still feel comfortable calling up either guy if possible. That's probably a good point. Like, I would feel fine if Michael Thomas has to come up, if Alan George has to come up as the last guy, Gunter or Dominique Davis. I'm not sure about the linebackers. I don't feel great about that, but you do need those guys on the practice squad for taking a beating and not getting your big money linebackers hurt. Jay Tufele, if he clears waivers, he's our highest graded guy here. If he clears waivers, clearly I'd like to have him on the 53-man roster. I would potentially like to get all 3 of these interior offensive linemen onto the practice squad. I think you definitely could. I think Trey Hill would be the guy that maybe another team would be interested in. Maybe. I don't think he played good enough for that. I think Mitch Wilcox, I would definitely like to get on the practice squad. And they're starting to fill up. You think 16, I'd have a clear shot at the rest of these. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 spots left. I definitely want to get Shedrick Jackson on that. And it's the other receivers too. We could talk about them. I do think Kwame Lassiter is a fine player. I do think Trent Taylor could be on the practice squad as a guy you call up to return punts for a couple games until you're sure Charlie Jones can do it. We'll talk about that afterwards. I want to put, I didn't have him listed because again, it's another guy I don't have a grade on. I'm going to put Jacob Sailors. I think he did enough in in the final preseason game when he finally got some action for a practice squad spot. Leaves us with 2 spots remaining. I'd love to get Sidney Jones on there if he clears and if he's willing. I'd get Cody Ford on there if he clears and he's willing. I mean, I would take Jackson Kirkland as well. Is one of those spots quarterback 3? We're trying to get someone else on here. We're trying to find somebody else and say QB 3, not knowing who it is, and then work from there. We don't have to count La'el Collins because pup list. Who's a guy of this list do we not want to lose? It could be Trent Taylor. Or are we just ready to rip that Band-Aid off and move on and go with Charlie Jones and figure it out from there and not worry about it? I kind of would like Cody Ford. Although Smith, Carmen, and Adeniji can play guard, I don't think any of them's ever looked good at guard. I don't think Cody Ford has either. So what are we talking about? Do we want to develop Jackson Kirkland? I thought he looked slow, stiff, robbed of all power despite being a big guy because he plays so tall. Past injury history. I think if possible, if he's willing and if he clears, I want to be Sidney Jones. I think Sidney Jones can play. If a guy goes down, because let's look at that corner room. If Turner's not ready to go because he's hurting still, if Awuzie is not ready to go, are you starting DJ Ivy? I'm not. I'm calling up Sidney Jones right away. And he's getting the start. If someone goes down later in the year, he's the guy you call up from the practice squad. So that means Marvell Tell, Jackson Kirkland, Cody Ford, Devin Asiasi, Trent Taylor, and Kwame Lassiter and Trevor Siemian do not make the roster in any capacity. And that quarterback 3 could be Siemian. Say you don't find a guy that you like. So maybe he's a placeholder now. We throw him in there for now because we want to have a third guy with Joe Burrow not being able to practice yet. And maybe that's how we handle it and say Simeon's the third guy, but also we are open to bringing somebody in potentially to be groomed to be the number 2. And that's your practice squad. So now let's go from there and let's highlight the guys that are active on game day. And we want to do it. I'm just going to hit a light orange color on them. And we're going to say clearly Joe Mixon is as well. I think Chris Evans, as of right now, is. Are we saying Travion Williams is healthy? So we'll just keep it moving for now. Actually, easier way to do this would be who is not going to be active. let's do a orange color on those guys. Let's say week 1, Andre Yoshivas is not active, not because he was poor or anything like that, but just because, well, somebody's got to be inactive. And if everyone's healthy at the receiver spot, when does he get on the field? You can get up to 48 guys active on a game day roster rather than 46, 47 if you have 8 offensive linemen that are active. You can activate a third quarterback now. Not that I think they did that rule correctly because it seems like it's not even worth it, but let's go and try and quickly say if we can get to 48 guys, we're going to have 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 5 guys inactive if we can get to 8 offensive linemen, which we have 9 here. Who would be the inactive guy? Like right now, Deontay Smith is hurt. Let's say it's him. That gives us 8 guys, so we're allowed to keep all 8 active. We need 3 more players, possibly inactive. I mean, let's say Miles Murphy right now. And if Joseph Osai is healthy, then Raymond Johnson would be inactive. And that's when I'd rather keep J2 Fele. Because why have Johnson if he's just going to be inactive? Is he that much of a developmental prospect that you're eventually going to use him? I don't see the path to that. All 5 linebackers. Yeah. So we still need 1 more. And it's probably, to me, DJ Ivy. And that's if we can get all of them. Now, if we got to get down and other candidates to be inactive, I guess you'd like to keep that fifth guy, but maybe Joe Bacci. How many defensive ends? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 DNs. Yeah. Is Stanley Morgan inactive in a day? Is that worth it? Do you have enough guys that you make Stanley Morgan inactive? Is one of your running backs inactive? Is Chase Brown not ready for it? Yeah, I don't think you can. I think with this lineup, you better have 8 guys ready to go on that O-line. So the last guy would probably be Joe Bacci. But I don't even think you have to get that far down if you have to. Maybe Trayvon Williams isn't healthy. Maybe he's a guy that you have inactive week 1. I don't think you make Charlie Jones inactive. You could and call up Trent Taylor if he's on your practice squad. Stanley Morgan could be, but then why is he on your roster if he's inactive on game day? It used to be 45 active. And if you're ever wondering why the active list is different from the regular, because it's a way to even out the competitive balance. If you go up with a team that's got 5 injured players and you have 1 injured player, then you've got more players to play on Sunday than they do. So if we try to say most teams are going to have injured guys, every team's going to have injured guys at some point. Let's cut it down and we're each allowed to have 6 or so injured players. It brings back competitive balance. So yeah, I think that's right. But I think the question there is the Raymond Johnson. Like if Johnson's inactive, then I don't need him. But then if I bring up Jay Tufele, yeah, because then if I bring up Jay Tufele and he's inactive, that's fine with me. And I just use him if somebody gets hurt or for development and for future years. I think another year of seasoning for Tufele, he could be a pretty good player for you. So maybe that's the 53. You let the active list decide there. And to be honest with you, I want Andre Yoshibas to be active on Sunday. If one of these guys goes down, are we okay with putting Trenton Irwin at the outside receiver spot for T. Higgins? Or do we want to see Yossi with Joe Burrow? So I'm putting some inactive players here that typically I would like to play. I mean, if DJ Turner's not ready, he could be inactive. I think all 4 safeties are active because they play so much special teams. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's our roster. And where could they claim someone? Maybe it's tight end. Maybe they're not happy with Tanner Hudson as tight end 3. Maybe they can upgrade from tight end 2. I think so. Maybe they find another last offensive lineman. Other than that, maybe running back. Maybe, I mean, you could upgrade. In my opinion, you could upgrade from Trayvon Williams. I know they like him. And then quarterback. So quarterback, running back, tight end, and maybe offensive line, because you should always be looking at that. That's where you could expect some changes to the 53-man roster to be. And with that, I'm Joe Goodberry. This has been Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. If you're looking for these guides, these player guides, go to firststarlogistics.com. Scroll down to the bottom. There's a link. And maybe we'll put the link in the bottom here. Wink, wink to my guy behind the camera here. Maybe we put a link in there and you can go and download the 2023 player evaluation guide with all these scores and breakdowns to give you a better idea. But I think that's a pretty strong roster. It looks like a top 5 roster in the league. Let's get Joe Burrow healthy. Let's get ready for week 1. We will break down the film of the final game versus Washington and maybe any film of guys they potentially claim. We'll talk about this on the next episode of Bengals on the Brain.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity now. Talking.